Hi everyone, and welcome back to Coachy TV. In this video, the second part of our marathon pace workout series, we're going to talk about the actual training design. If you missed part one where we talked about the science behind marathon pace workouts, I would highly recommend watching that video first. It's in the description down below. I am Kyle Giacono. I'm the head boys cross country and track coach at Wharton High School in Tampa, Florida, and I have been for the last 6 years. If you'd like a closer look at my credentials, they're on the screen. All right, let's get right into marathon pace workouts. So on these days, you're probably not going to need a full continuous warm-up run to get ready. You're probably going to have some still kind of form and mechanical type warm-up drills, but a lot of times you'd have in a high intensity day some kind of low intensity continuous run just to get yourself loose of a mile, 2 miles, 10 minutes, however you do it. And it may not be necessary on these days, especially because as we talk about the microcycle length here and the amount of times you're going to do it, you're going to get a lot of these workout types each microcycle. So you're going to be used to the intensity if you're doing these, and it's probably better if you get all of your miles all kind of strung together, especially if you're training for one of these very, very long races like the marathon, half marathon that we're going to talk about here. So for distance runners working out at this pace, the biggest thing that you're going to want to look at here is probably moderate tempo. You're going to have a lot of these in your microcycles. 78 to 82% of VVO2 max. Probably 80 to 82 would be even better, but give yourself a little bit of a range in here. If you missed in part one, we talked about how to calculate this, again, in the description down below, the first video that's posted there, where we talked about the science of it. And again, this is the same intensity that I recommend if you looked at our lactic threshold workout video as called a moderate tempo or easy tempo pace run. Now, the big difference here is the amount of times you're going to get this per microcycle, so that this is going to feel much easier, and it's very important to get this workout type in this type of training regimen. So you're going to look at about 2 to 3 of these per microcycle. Now it says there short micros or short microcycles. For a marathon pace, for somebody dealing with trying to get ready for a marathon, a half marathon, maybe as short as a 15K or a 10K, the types of workouts or the number of different workout types you're going to need to have gets reduced. So basically when you're training somebody, if you think about the ends, the extreme distances, the super short 100 and the super long marathon, half marathon. The further out you get, the fewer workout types you need because you're really training much harder specific types of your energy systems. With a marathon, you're obviously going to be much more dealing with your aerobic system. And in part one, we talked about how the pace of a marathon actually should never develop lactic acid because it's still in aerobic threshold training zones. So we need to get used to being able to have enough fuel sources and have the running economy and all these different things to get out to that distance. So the number of workout types is going to be much reduced. So typically, somebody training for a marathon or half marathon or one of these super long distance races, you're probably only going to have a 5-day microcycle because you need to repeat these workouts. They become more important because of all the different volumes you need. So if you have 2 to 3 per microcycle and you have a 5-day microcycle, this is going to be a huge part of your training regimen. You're probably going to have a long run, you're probably going to have some recovery runs, and you're probably going to have these workout types here, a moderate tempo, and then we're going to talk about one other type here that you can mix in for some variety. But that's the idea. Short microcycles, this is going to be a big part of your diet. We talked about in part one, if you have a 2-a-day type runs, and you're probably going to need to if you're training for a marathon to get all the different types of or amount of miles you need, the moderate tempo is the perfect second workout of the day. If you have a recovery run in the morning, throw a moderate tempo in, you've gotten loose from the morning run, and then you can do this and you can come back with something more like a long run the next day. So 2 to 3 of these per microcycle, and you're going to go 60 to 90 minutes. We talked about in part one the fact that you can hold this pace for up to 2 hours. So this is going to be close to where you can actually hold on to, and it's going to make your body able to maintain these paces for longer so that when you go out and do a marathon or a half marathon, you can hold it for 90 minutes, 2 hours, 2.5 hours, those types of things. Any breaks should be very, very short, 30 seconds. This is still an aerobic threshold type training regimen, and anything over 20 minutes and you get a lot of these improvements that we're looking for. Bigger heart, more capillaries, all the things we talked about in part one. And if you do more than, say, you can go out to maybe 60 seconds, but anything more than that and you're going to restart the clock on that 20-minute window, and you're not going to be doing as much benefit as you possibly could if you were to really do this almost straight through. Progression runs, so this is to kind of throw some variety. Any 2 or 3 of your moderate tempos could, and the moderate tempo basically is just straight through at that intensity, 78 to 82. Pretty easy tempo run, you just go straight through. A progression run can maybe replace one of those, maybe 2 of these moderate tempos in a microcycle just for some variety. You're going to get very similar training in, but if you're just doing the same thing over and over again, this will throw some variety in there. So replace one of these moderate tempos in your microcycle would be a good way to start. And essentially, after you've done some warm-up mechanical stuff, again, I would not recommend a full true warm-up run on these, you would go out and each mile is going to get faster than the one previous. Starting at recovery run or aerobic threshold pace, 65 to 70% of your current VVO2 max. And you're going to be ending at that same 82%, that's the top end here of the moderate tempo. So you go out at 65% for the first mile, maybe you bring it down to 70, then you're at like 73, 75, you're building out for a 60 to 90 minute run. So very similar here, it just kind of keeps things a little bit more interesting for variety's sake. And just like for this one, any breaks should be very, very short because you don't want to restart that window. These days are great to end with a good stretch. Obviously, any of these days you want to make sure that you're bringing your body temperature and your heart rate down, and a good stretch afterwards help with that. And it's also a good day for you to do some core work on the back end. As we mentioned, this is also very good as the second run of the day if you're double running to get all the miles you need in to have a successful marathon or half marathon. You just have to split them up. Anything over about 60 to 65 miles a week, and you're going to have to double run to get everything you need safely. You're going to have a long run obviously in there. That's a lot of it, but you can't do that every single day just physiologically. So these are great second runs of the day to kind of get into. Now, for a short middle distance runner, this is obviously not an ideal workout type. I go over this in detail in our lactic threshold video series, which is in the description down below. You're not going to have a short middle distance runner probably looking to do this. You might have a kid in college that you want them to run maybe a 10K, but there's other ways you're going to have to get the volume out of them. This is just not ideally situated for their muscle fiber type. It's just not really a good thing to look at. And if you want a full description on that, it is in the description down below, the lactic threshold training regimen. So let's talk about some key points here. Multiple marathon pace workouts are really only needed for those training for these ultra long distances. Marathon, half marathon, those ultra marathons you see, and possibly the 10 to 15K. The reason being, all of these races are run from the marathon, half marathon, and ultra marathon, and possibly 15K are all really run at an aerobic threshold type pace. You're not developing any acid. So you don't have to worry about things like clearing acid. You don't have to worry as much about things like VO2 max. You certainly don't have to worry about anaerobic glycolytic energy demands here because they just don't come into play in these races. They're not run fast enough. You have to be economical with your fuel sources, your storage of these different fuel substrates, how much energy you're using for each step. And so these are things that are really only, and so many of these in a workout microcycle are not going to help you with these other races. Too many of these make you really good at these paces. There's that idea of the law of specificity. Every workout has a specific training adaptation. You run at marathon pace, you're going to get really good at marathon pace, which is fantastic if you're running these races that are contested in that area. You're going to get multiple of these. It's just not going to help you, though, for these shorter races. Again, it might help you for the 10K, but you're probably going to have better luck if you put more of your attention in other areas if you're looking at the 10K. And especially the 5K, 3,200 meter, any of those track races, they're just not long enough for this to be a huge staple like your recovery runs and long runs and other things that you need at those race distances. So make sure that if you are watching this and you're planning to put this in place, 2 to 3 of these per microcycle, you should be getting ready for a marathon, half marathon, ultra marathon. Law of specificity, don't do this just because it sounds cool to say marathon pace. Make sure that it makes sense for your race itself. The design adaptations include cardiovascular, muscular, and metabolic improvements we talked about in part 1. And the biggest need for somebody trying to do these very long races is for better use of fat as a fuel substrate. People that are good distance runners, general population, you're using fat and carbohydrates evenly at aerobic threshold, 65 to 70% of date pace VVO2 max. The marathon is run faster than that, 82% of your date pace VO2 max. Half marathon a little bit faster. And the idea being is if we just use our carbohydrate stores, we're not going to get through a marathon or a half marathon. The human body is great at storing fat. We can store weeks worth of fat. We can store a few days worth of water, but we can only store about 2 hours worth of glycogen, stored glucose or sugar. We've got to be able to get through, if it's a marathon, a more than 2-hour race. No human has broken the 2-hour barrier yet. So the idea being is we have to be able to have some of this fat used as our fuel to get us all the way through it. Running multiple races, needing several of these per microcycle makes us, at this pace, makes us better able to use fat as fuel at these faster paces. Fat is a very complex molecule, so once you start needing energy faster as you get faster, your body just can't break it down and use it as a fuel source. So it kind of abandons it, for the most part, to use that stored glucose, the carbohydrates. But if you do a lot more of these workouts, your body just gets a little bit better each time of not only storing the fat near the working muscles, but using these fats at a faster intensity. That is one of the biggest reasons why you're doing these over and over again, as well as running economy. This is really a good workout type to getting you more economical at running races for these very, very long distances. And the last thing, these workouts and frequencies, again, do not help 5K or shorter. They just do not. 1 per microcycle can help you in a 5K. You need some running economy for a 5K, and especially as we talked about in previous videos, the mile, the 2 mile, these different races definitely need running economy to be a big part of them. But again, it's the amount that you're getting. 1 of these per microcycle is what you need. Anything more and you're getting away from the specific need of those races. Moderate tempo runs are helpful if done sparingly, 1 microcycle in those races. I just mentioned that. And doing them as often as is needed for ultra long races, and these workouts will only work against you in the 5K or shorter. It's going to diminish your glycogen, and you're not going to be doing enough workouts at these other intensities you needed for those races. So that takes us through marathon pace, and basically I've posted a video now on every aerobic type of training regimen that you would really want to do, from anything from the marathon down to the 800, and we've also done some workouts on strength runs or hill runs. So in the next little bit, I'm going to be doing some workout videos that take a look at different things like muscle fiber content between different types of racers. We're going to look at different things like the different race demands that you might need for different races. We're going to look at how you can sequence some of these things, since we're right in the middle of the summer. People are getting ready for cross country. How you can sequence things together for your general prep and specific prep type seasons. And then when we get a little bit closer to when you would be doing some speed workouts, I'll talk about some anaerobic type training designs as we get a little bit closer into that part of most people's season. So if you like the video, please think about liking or subscribing to the channel. If you have any questions, please ask them in the comments down below. And until next time, this has been Coach TV.